Hello guys, and welcome to Strategic Command World War II World at War. Buckle up, because today we have a beginner's guide, and I'm going to touch a little bit on everything there is to know to get you through the door, and more detailed guides will follow later in the playlist located in the description below, where there is already a what is video in case you have no idea what this game is and want to learn what it is. But without further ado, let's get into it. We have our main menu right here. We have the options, single player, hot seat, PBEM++, load, and settings. Settings, very simple. You have your volumes, your resolution options, interface tips. This is your tooltips. Alternate date format. This is if you live somewhere like Europe, for example, instead of America, where you put the day in front of the month. Single player is self-explanatory. You will be versing the AI. We'll get more into that in a moment. Hot seat it's an old school term, but it means multiplayer, but on the same monitor, not split screen in this case. Hot seat, as in the seat is hot because someone's always sitting in the seat. So you sit down, you do your turn, and then you get up, walk away from the computer. The other person sits down and does their turn. That's what this is. This is to set up a hot seat so that there is no AI by default for the leader of both sides. Again, more on that in a moment. PBEM++ online. This is play by email ++. Don't worry, you don't have to actually play by email. It automates this whole system. It is kind of laggy to get started. This is their own server, their own service. So no matter what you play this on, Steam, GOG, Slytherin, actually like downloaded straight from them, you will be able to get into this once you make an account and sign in. You'll find open challenges here. You could post your own here, and you'll find ones that you're already in right here. I'm currently recording a PvP with Sir Travis, and that's what this is right here. I'm waiting on him to get the turn back to me. Backing out of that, let's go into single player for actually learning how to properly play the game, right? So when you're trying to start up a campaign, you have a list of scenarios right here. 1939 World at War. This is like the base scenario that most players are probably going to play, especially if you're playing the Axis, because you get to start with the invasion of Poland, which is already in progress at this point, but you get to start with that. Axis will go first. It says that right here. Every one of these will tell you who goes first. Your turn will be 14 days as, say, the Axis, and then it'll go to the Allies, where the AI will do their turn. Or if you're the Allies, then you'll wait and do your turn then, after watching what is visibly available to you through the fog of war. If you look, there's some other alternate scenarios. If you want to get into like the height of the Axis, skip the phony war era, you could do that. 1943, where the Allies turn the tide, America's already in the war and is kind of going on the offensive. You can go ahead and start this up instead if you want a shorter game, for example. There's some other ones here that make the victory conditions harder to achieve with stricter timers, as well as a modification. Yes, this is a modification to the naval combat. If you don't like the naval combat, you might check these out. But more than likely, you're going to start here. So I'm going to start here. Hit victory here, and you can see the victory conditions for any given scenario. You have the decisive victories listed only. Please refer to 1939 World at War Strategy Guide for further information. This is telling you that there's more than the decisive victories, and they are in the manual. For an example on how to find the manual, I pull up my handy dandy This PC Windows Explorer. I go into the SSD that has the game installed. I find the platform I installed it off of. For example, GOG, I find Strategic Command, World War II, World at War, and then I find manuals. And here I have all the manuals, which are in different languages, and the strategy guides for different official scenarios. Manuals will teach you how to play the game. Strategy guides are not just giving you advice on how to play the game, but they're going over a lot of the events you can expect in the game as well, because this game has a lot of random events. So that's how that works in case you want to access that. Now, if we go ahead and play campaign, we'll get to choose our side. Axis versus Allies. It can be a little overwhelming to play this many nations at once, but unfortunately, this is just how it works. Major nations cannot change sides, and you see all the major nations listed here immediately. Axis starts out with Germany, Italy, and Japan. Minor nations can join under a major nation, sharing their money pool and being controlled by that major power and its resources and its tech. For example, if Hungary joins the Axis, they're going to join under Germany. And who they join under is actually preset. It's predetermined. But they will join under Germany. Germany will get all their money. Hungary will get all of Germany's resources. If you're playing as Germany, then you'll get to control them directly. And I specify because this game has the ability to have AI process friendly turns as well. For example, if I click on these, they're now circled in blue. Now I would only be playing Germany, technically speaking. I'll load into the game. I'll be able to see and interact with everybody's units. However, I only need to worry about Germany and miners of Germany. When I hit end turn, first it'll process friendly AI turns before going into the next turn where it will process my enemies' turns. For example, the Allies have the UK, France, America, Soviet Union, Poland, China, and India. These are their major nations. India is a weird choice, I know, but I didn't make the choice. If you find it weird, don't worry, I do too. None of these nations are allowed to change sides. A lot of the miners that are under the UK's empire will join you eventually. They don't start out with you, which is another very weird thing, but this is how it works. Unfortunately, this doesn't allow things that were very plausible in real life. For example, the USSR applied to the Axis twice and was invaded shortly after their second application. So they very well could have not been in this war, but they are guaranteed to be in this war. Just like Japan is pretty much guaranteed to go to war with America. The game has mechanics to enforce a certain amount of history. So if what you're looking for is choice, there's not actually an insane amount of that in this game. This is more about history. You still have freedom to do ahistorical things, but deciding which majors are on which side, that's not one of the choices you get. There are different difficulties. As you see, it does change some of the computer bonuses at the bottom. Intermediate is the normal default difficulty. If you go online, you'll find a lot of things saying, oh, well, you should give the computer some spotting bonuses or MPP bonuses to make it more fair. If you're new to the game, ignore all of that. Just play it on whatever difficulty is most approachable to you. The difficulties themselves do matter, not just the computer bonuses, but you can mix and match them any way that you want once you have an idea of what you're doing with the game. Once you hit OK, you'll get more options here. These are just cosmetic things. You want to see the nations colored by nation or by side. This will depend on if you're playing with friendly AI or not, if you really care about that aesthetic, but it's there if you want it. You can get a last turn summary, which is good to kind of remind you, hey, this is what happened last turn when you go into a new turn. One point of contention I see with a lot of hardcore war game players, which this is not a hardcore war game, this is a more approachable intermediate war game. Novices can play this game quite easily. You could turn off the 3D counters. So do you want to see and customize tanks and ships like you're playing a board game, or do you want to see NATO counters? That's up to you. Personally, I prefer the pretty graphics. I don't know what the fuck this means. I do know that this is a tank. You can enable or disable the ability to undo movements. You can enable or disable the ability for units to retreat if they're taking too much damage, for example. Weather effects, and of course, fog of war. There's some options that affect AI, but all of these are just to speed up the AI. Don't show the AI's moves in their combat. If you have that, having the last turn summary is useful. You could speed up the animation or not. Honestly, I recommend not having this enabled to start. You could change all of these settings right here when you're already in the game, and then get rid of all messages during AI turn as well. You could change the border style that goes around nations, marking their borders. I prefer the black borders. If I had any other ones, the white ones would be pretty good. And then you go into advanced options. I'm not going to go over all of these at the moment. This is a bit much. This is more just flavor to customize how your game runs. You could disable the end date. You can make it so there's no hard caps, for example, on unit production, instead making things cost more and more the more you build. And if you go into scripts, then you could customize a lot of things here. The AI of this game, by the way, does cheat by default, and there are decisions that affect that. To change most of them, you'll want to go to unit, go to around page 13, and through that you'll see Allied AI, Axis AI, and you can individually turn a lot of these off. Look for anything that specifies AI, and that is generally a cheat that the AI will use when going up against a player. You can turn these off to make the game more fair, or you can leave them enabled to make the game more difficult. It's really up to you. And then you go ahead and you hit OK. Once everything's set up, it'll load up. It's not the most responsive game. It really isn't. And then you'll get into your turn. If you're Axis, you'll start. If you're Allies, you'll have to wait for the turn. Now we're loaded into the game. When you do start, you'll get a bunch of pop-ups of strategic advice. That strategic advice is pretty good. It's the most useful thing you'll get in this game outside of looking at the manual. Anytime the game tells you something that looks important, I suggest writing it down or taking a screenshot. Be careful, because clicking on the game does usually get rid of stuff like that. And this is what the game looks like with these settings that we have selected here. One thing I suggest the moment you're in is making sure that this toggle right down here is enabled to show map info, so that when you hover over things like this on the map, that it actually shows what these are. Because see, I turn it off and now there's no tooltip. So make sure that's on. I would definitely recommend that. What these are, by the way, these are convoys. White means they're not active. Red is the allies, it's not enemies. Blue is the Axis, and you can follow the little arrows to their destinations to see what these convoys are coming from and going to. There are convoys on the map that you could see if you go to the war maps at the top, go to convoy map, and here's all your convoys. You could click on them to see information about them. For example, Norway's giving us 40 MPPs. It's currently at 100% value because it's summer. If it was winter, it would be operating less efficiently. Some of these convoys also allow you to specify how much you want to send. For example, as the Allies, the UK can eventually send MPPs to the USSR, but it can send them none or a vast amount, like 40% of total MPPs, for example, and any single percentage range in between. The war map is also where you're going to declare war. If we zoom in on Europe, for example, as Germany, you'll eventually want to invade France. You'll be at war with France after the first turn, don't worry about it. But for example, if you wanted to go through the Low Countries, you'd have to select Belgium with Germany selected down here. Make sure it's Germany, not Italy or Japan. Germany selected down here, you'd select Belgium and you'd hit declare war right there. This is some information about what you can expect in a nation without looking too closely. They have one capital city town, one port, one mine. Mines and oils are very useful for generating resources. And they have one fortress. The USSR has 32 towns, 19 ports, 4 oil points, 13 mines, and no current fortifications built, as an example. You could see a leaning towards the side. For example, Bulgaria is leaning towards us 50%. That means they're 50% of the way to joining us. There's things that affect that, which we'll go over in a moment. Percentage, and you can look around the map. Just instead of seeing the flags, you could see their percentage towards the side. 100% means that that person is in the war on that side. Again, blue is Axis, red is allies, and anything less just kind of shows you what you can expect in the future. The strategy map is just a zoomed out map of all your units you could take a look at and jump in on any point. If I just zoom out normally, I will get effectively the strategy map, but it'll be on my entire screen now. Looking at the UI, the nation you have selected will be right here with the name and their amount of money. MPPs is money. It's an abstracted resource, essentially, that everything that generates money will produce. For example, hovering over right here, this mine, if you look at the bottom right here, it's worth 20 MPPs. That is at 10 strength. So it's worth 2 MPPs per 1 strength. It's producing that every single turn. Lower the strength of it by bombing it or choking it of supply somehow, and then you will reduce the MPP value. And this applies to literally everything on the map, including towns. Towns can produce these resources as well. You can also glance at the mobilization of other majors. So Italy's not in the war yet, it's only 65% leaning. It will join in time due to historical events, however, and their current MPP amounts. Whether they're in the war or not, I can still go to them and control them. Just to go over my UI a little bit, looking at the bottom, there's some things here that you may or may not have on. This is to control the showing of the grid. I like seeing the grid because this is on a grid, this game. and this helps me understand if there's openings. I can hide or show units. This can be very helpful for getting an idea of what is where. There's the supply map. Click it once and you see all supply that is actually really relevant to you in the war. Hit it again and you can see the predicted supply for the next turn. In this case, it even spills over into enemy territory because there's the opportunity that we might get that far, and it wants us to know. This will hide or show upgradable units. So if you have this on, you'll see these little things. This shows the upgrades in order from top to bottom. It's different for every unit, so I can't tell you for sure which each one will be from left to right. You just kind of have to learn what they are on each type of unit. And then this is to show reinforceable units. It'll show the number in green if you can reinforce a unit. For example, this Italian unit can be reinforced to 10. See, now it's white. I've also used this unit's turn by reinforcing it. Now it cannot move. It can't do anything. If you move something, it can attack from that point, but it can't do reinforcement unless you swap. So if I hold shift on here, I have this unit selected, I hold shift and I click this, they'll swap. This is still enough, like it's a half turn. They can still attack, but they're not at war right now, so they don't need to. But they can still also reinforce, for example. And now I've reinforced them. If you have NATO counters on, I'm gonna assume you know what they all mean, and so I'm not gonna explain them to you because I don't know what they mean. But looking at this, you'll see 3 little men, that's a corps. 4 men, that's an army. If you have 1 man, that's a garrison. This right here is obviously a cavalry. This right here is a mechanized unit. This is a tank. This is a medium bomber. There are different cosmetics for bombers and such from different nations, and they change as they upgrade. For example, as you can see the little image right here, it will change to try to reflect historical appearances. You can right click on anything and go into properties to get more information about it for the units. Attack values shows what it will be good against. The higher the number, the better it will be against said thing. Defense value shows what it will be good defending against. Air is not very good at defending against anything. Rather, it is escorted by fighters. For example, fighters can escort anything within a certain range. This slightly transparent yellow pattern over some things here shows that if there's a plane here, for example, like a bomber, and it goes into attack, I can fly with it and protect it. It's a little more limited in range than this blue one, which shows if that's under attack, then I can go protect it. If you want even more details, that's where you get under general. You can see the escort range, the intercept range, the strike range. You can see the amount of interceptions, escorts, and strikes available to a unit as well, and how far they can spot. You can see what target type they are, and if they project a zone of control. A zone of control is generally around land units, and it'll stop enemy units from going through. It'll even tell you you're passing through a zone of control. It's going to cost more action points to move. And yes, you have action points. I have a unit selected here. If it's green, it means I can go there. If I'm next to a unit, I can attack. You'll see a prediction here. The Iron Cross for Germany, and then a different roundel for the Poles right now. The 4 means they will lose 4. I will lose nothing. At least that's a prediction. It's not guaranteed. There are settings in the advanced settings to guarantee this, but there's a little bit of randomness to keep it dynamic. So for example, if I go ahead and attack, bam, I've destroyed that enemy cavalry. Tanks, they can get 2 attacks based on certain research you have. Moving, again, very simple. If I want to move, I could just take, say, this, move him up. Gotta keep in mind terrain, rivers, forests will all have different kinds of penalties and such. If you want, you can even right-click on any terrain hex to look at its properties. If it's anything other than a field, fields are very neutral. You can entrench in them by standing in those locations twice. Every other location will have different maximum entrenches, as well as different defensive bonuses. Again, entrenching, you just want to sit still for a couple turns, and then your entrenchment value right down here will go up. Morale and readiness is also a factor, as well as strength and supply. You have your maximum action points. This can be changed, for example, by upgrading units with mobility, which is very expensive. This gives them little half tracks, for example, to ride around in. I'll go far more in depth on all this stuff with more detailed guides. I'm just trying to get you in the door right now, in case it seems like I'm rushing through certain things. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll answer them, or let you know if there's a guide that will go further in depth on that topic already. If I click on an HQ, I can see certain units are highlighted. These are units that are being given buffs by that HQ. HQs are very important for buffs, and if you sit them on places where supply is generated, such as towns, that's what these numbers are, by the way, like 12, 8, 8 towns, the zeros are showing an upgrade path like right here, but for say anti-air. If I put him on this town, then he would actually boost the supply from there and help spread it. You can also be ahead of a supply source and boost it up and spread it as well. Majors can have their own HQs. Each major HQ can provide buffs to anyone within its own major faction. So Germany can have HQs providing buffs to German units as well as to Hungarian units when they join, for example. But Hungarian HQs, as a minor, can only take care of Hungarian units. The German units are not going to be able to receive buffs from Hungarian HQs. Land units can upgrade anywhere that they have enough supply. Naval units have to be on ports in order to do that. Ports are also a good way to defend naval units by keeping them away from enemy ships and providing them with passive bonuses as well. Air units function more like land units, except for the fact that they can pass over naval hexes, for example. If you right-click a unit that hasn't moved, you can operate it if it's on a train line. You can kind of see the train lines here. They're very hard to see, but they're drawn with art. But I can operate the unit via train and send it anywhere where there's enough supply for it to go that is relevant for that unit to be able to go. I can't go into, for example, the train line of a nation that's not even in the war, and I can't go into a nation who I've just taken over and now they have no supply because the train line isn't ready yet. Planes can do the same things, except they don't need, I don't have enough money to actually do it. We probably do if I look at Japan. Yeah. It's more expensive to do this with a plane, but this is more just like teleportation with the plane. There just needs to be enough supply at the start and end location, and that's it. It costs way more money than just normal movement, but they can do it. Movement can be impeded by weather. That's another thing to think of. We have our mini map that we could click on to go around, click and drag as well. We could zoom in and out nice and fine. There are the settings here at the top right if you ever want to access them again. A lot of these will affect how your game works, even such as scrolling speed. You can affect as well. Hit this to end turn. Make sure you don't hit this unless you're ready, because then you'll be sitting here for a while the AI does its work, or in PBEM, you'll be waiting for the player to get stuff back to you. Info, this is a shortcut to see hotkeys. It'll open up the user manual in probably Edge, or the strategy guide and the victory conditions. I'd really recommend accessing these via the files, however, because I can't tell you how much this decides to open Edge instead of opening Opera, my default, which is obnoxious. You could save the game here. This works in multiplayer as well, or quit out, which will save as well if you're in multiplayer. The top here, you're seeing the national morale of every single major nation, whether they're in the war or not. When a nation's at 0, it will surrender. If they surrender, then it'll actually just show them at 100, which is weird. You can see reports on all information in the game here. You can see the losses of every single major. All minor losses under them will be counted here. You can get more detailed losses right down to individual units, which is crazy. I have no idea what the fuck a mulberry is, to be completely honest, but that's there. You could go into deeper graphs for every single nation. You just have to select it right here. You could see their convoy income and their losses from enemy activity. You can see stuff on raiders, sub losses and surface fleet losses inflicted, strategic bombing, research and diplomacy expenditure, plunder gained from taking over nations, MPP gain and expenditure on units, and of course national morale. These charts will look way better when you're not on turn 1 because they'll actually have more things to work off of. Every single nation that you can have selected has its own research. Some nations do share with each other research progress, sort of, like not I have this level so I'll give you this level. It's more like I'll help speed up your research in return is the most that they do. This is automated. You'll have to check the manual to see which nations do and don't do this with what other particular nations. Definitely simpler as the axis, but as you see, every nation has different research. Every nation has its own MPP income, and you cannot directly trade MPPs between nations without events or convoys prompting you to do this. There's also the diplomacy. This is what you could do to try to get nations to join you, separate to, invading them, taking them over, or going through event paths. You can spend money, 50 MPPs, for example, into a chit. There's a limit to how many chits you can use. It's different for every nation, and certain nations, like America, actually are just more effective at diplomacy in general. You could see what leaning any nation has towards joining a certain side. For example, the DEI is 25% towards the Axis at the start due to trade relations with Japan. If they do join, they will join Japan. This is something that you can make happen by investing MPPs, for example. I don't have enough money as Germany. As Japan, for example. Every chit is a 5% chance of success to make them move towards you by a variable amount, sometimes small, sometimes high. You'll need multiples, for example, of these stacked up to actually get good results. You really have to base it on your timeline. Is a 10% chance every turn enough to get me to my goal by the timeline that I have set? That is up to you. You can also declare war from this screen as well. You could purchase units here, and every nation has their options here. You could see, like, minor nations, Slovakia can have a core. With hard caps, like I talked about earlier, they can only have one core, which they already have. With soft caps, they could have more. It would just cost more. Which one you pick is up to you. I usually play with the hard caps, even though I don't necessarily agree with them. I understand that the game was balanced with these in mind. You could see what is already in production for any one of your nations. Minors will get lumped in with majors. This sorts by the months, and then from left to right is the years. There's a handy little toggle here so that it will double check your purchases with you before you hit the purchase button in case you misclick a lot. New units, when they are done, will pop out right here as new units. You could place them anywhere on the map. Otherwise, the purchase screen will tell you a production delay, for example. So a garrison has a production delay of 1 month. By default, let's say there's a month. The delay is on top of that. So every nation take 1 month, add it by this number, and that is the amount of months that you will have to wait. Months, not turns, by the way, until that unit is done. So a garrison will take 2 months. 1 month base plus 1 month production delay. This is the amount of them that I can make. And you can even type in your own names for them here, if you so choose. Or you can select some preset suggested names. Not seeing a preset suggested name doesn't mean you can't make the unit, it just means you have to type in your own name. You can also rename units that are on the map with a right click, rename, and then blah blah. And now this is the blah blah core. Like I said, the game will have pop-ups, usually in between turns after you've hit end turn or before your turn starts. Those will give you options that will move historical things in line, and those will give you kind of a way to go. However, don't expect them to do everything for you. Sometimes the game will give you free units and events, sometimes it won't. For example, Operation Torch will not happen from an event. The invasion of France and the Low Countries will not happen from an event, neither will D-Day. Poland starts by default. The invasion of the USSR will not happen from an event, even if many things will help prepare you for it in the events. However, the annexation of Indochina will happen via an event. Thailand will join via an event, one that doesn't even get announced, assuming you go the historical path. If you want to see every single event, then you're going to have to go look at the strategy guide for whatever scenario that you were playing. You can actually look at the full list, generally full list, of the events that you can expect. That is basically everything. However, it's the most I can really go into in a beginner's guide. It's already a long guide. I'll definitely go further in depth on all of these things in future guides. Let me know what guides would help you the most in the comments below. Again, any questions, any thoughts, and again, playlist in the description for guides on this game. For now, though, I hope this beginner set of information has been helpful to you and starting your game. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.